There are monsters in this world that were never meant to be monsters at all. Some are born from rage, others from ambition, but the Big Daddy was born from something far more human. He was born from guilt. Before the armor, before the drill, before the ocean claimed him entirely, he was a man. Not a hero, not a villain. Just a man who made choices he could never take back. Rapture promised freedom. Andrew Ryan promised a city where the great would not be constrained by the small, where science would not bow to ethics, where human potential could finally breathe without the weight of morality crushing it into dust. And for a while it worked. Rapture was beautiful. Glass towers beneath the Atlantic, neon lights reflecting off steel and seawater. The hum of progress in every corridor. But progress has a cost. And in Rapture, that cost was always paid in flesh. Adam changed everything. The genetic substance harvested from sea slugs could rewrite biology itself, heal the sick, enhance the mind, reshape the body into something superhuman. But Adam was unstable. It degraded. It corrupted. It turned visionaries into addicts and addicts into monsters. The splicers were born from that hunger. Twisted reflections of what humanity could become when desire outweighed restraint. But Adam needed carriers. It needed hosts. And so the little sisters were created. Girls no older than 7 or 8, implanted with slugs, their eyes glowing amber with genetic fire. They wandered the ruins of Rapture, harvesting Adam from the dead, innocent and unaware of the horror they carried inside them. And they needed protection. That is where he came in. Not by choice, not by honor, by necessity, by desperation. The Protector program was Rapture's answer to the chaos. Take broken men, men with nothing left to lose, men drowning in debt or guilt or shame. Offer them a purpose. Bond them to the little sisters. Fuse their flesh to armor so thick it could withstand pressures no human body was meant to endure. Remove enough of their mind to make them obedient. Leave just enough to make them care. The surgery was agony. He remembered that much. Remembered the drills boring into his skull. Remembered the metal grafting to bone. Remembered the chemical fire in his veins as his body was reshaped into something that could no longer drown. The Big Daddy suit was not worn. It was him. Flesh and steel inseparable. A walking monument to function over humanity. But they left something inside him. A need so deep it survived the reconditioning. The bond to the little sisters was not just programming. It was instinct. It was love twisted into duty. And it could not be removed. He walked the ocean floor, escorting his little sister through the flooded halls of Rapture. She hummed to herself, oblivious to the corpses she knelt beside, drawing Adam from their bodies with her needle. He stood watch, patient. His drill hummed low, a warning to anything that might approach. Splicers learned quickly. Attack a little sister, and the Big Daddy would not stop until you were pulp. He did not hate them. He did not feel anything toward them at all, only toward her. The girl, his girl, the one his entire existence now revolved around. He would die for her. He would kill for her. He would walk through fire and pressure and darkness and never stop until she was safe. But Rapture was dying. The city was collapsing. The idealism had curdled into desperation. Fontaine was dead. The remaining scientists scrambled for solutions, for salvage, for one last breakthrough that might stabilize the city before the ocean claimed it entirely. They experimented with dimensional energy, theories pulled from quantum physics and smuggled research. If Adam could rewrite biology, perhaps reality itself could be rewritten. Perhaps Rapture could be saved. Perhaps the little sisters could be freed from their dependence on corpses and sea slugs. The experiment was conducted in the deep labs, where the pressure was greatest and the walls groaned under the weight of the Atlantic. He was there. She was there. The machines hummed. The scientists spoke in hurried whispers. And then the rift opened. It was not light. It was the absence of light. A tear in the fabric of the world, bleeding colors that had no name. The scientist screamed. Alarm shrieked. The little sister reached for him, and he moved toward her, every instinct firing at once. But the rift expanded. It swallowed sound. It swallowed pressure. It swallowed him. The last thing he heard before the ocean gave way to something worse was her voice. Confused, calling for her guardian. And then there was only the void. The ocean had rules. Depth. Cold. The Big Daddy understood these things. His body was built for them. His armor designed to endure crushing weight, freezing temperatures, the suffocating silence of the deep. But this was not the ocean. This was something else entirely. He awoke suspended in nothing. No water, no gravity, no direction. The pressure was still there, but it was wrong. It did not come from above or below. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. A weight without source, a suffocation without substance. His suit groaned, metal grinding against itself, but it held. It always held. Around him shapes moved, not shapes. The idea of shapes, things that flickered in and out of existence, half-formed and writhing. They had too many limbs, too many eyes, too many mouths that opened in silence and screamed without sound. They circled him, curious, predatory, confused. The warp did not operate on logic. It operated on emotion, on the raw psychic energy of sentient thought given form. Demons were born from desire, from rage, from despair, from the echoes of a trillion screaming souls feeding the chaos gods in their endless hunger. But the Big Daddy did not desire. He did not rage. He did not despair. He only protected. The demons could not understand him. They probed his mind, reaching with claws of thought, searching for the cracks that always existed in mortal psyche. Pride. Every human had a crack. Every human could be corrupted. That was the nature of chaos. That was the inevitability of the warp. But they found nothing. Not because his mind was empty. It was not. Beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the surgical rewiring, beneath the chemical suppression, there was still a man. But that man had been buried so deeply, wrapped in so many layers of programming and instinct and purpose, that the demons could not reach him. They scratched at armor. They whispered promises. They offered power, freedom, release from duty. He did not respond. They offered him vengeance against those who had taken his humanity. He did not respond. They showed him visions of the little sisters torn apart, harvested, destroyed. He moved, not toward the demons, toward the echoes, toward the faint psychic residue of a child's voice that lingered somewhere in the madness. It was not her. It could not be her. She was an ocean away, in another reality, in a world he would never return to. But the instinct did not care about logic. The instinct only cared about protection. The demons recoiled. Confusion rippled through the warp. A being that moved without rage, that acted without corruption, that could not be tempted, manipulated, or broken. It was an anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of chaos itself. Time did not exist here. He walked for seconds or centuries. The warp twisted around him, shapes blooming and collapsing, realities folding into themselves. He saw glimpses of other places, other wars, cities burning, worlds screaming, a golden throne surrounded by endless darkness, a laughing god feasting on souls. And through it all, he walked. His drill hummed, constant. The sound was a comfort, a reminder of purpose. In Rapture, that hum had meant safety. It had meant a Big Daddy was near. It had meant the little sisters were protected. Here, in this place without meaning, it was the only thing that made sense. The demon stopped following him, not out of fear, out of disinterest. He was not prey. He was not a servant. He was not even a threat. He was simply incompatible with the nature of chaos itself. A closed system, a locked door, a mind that could not be opened because it had already been welded shut around a single, unbreakable truth. Protect the child. Somewhere in the swirling madness, a rift began to form. Not like the one that had swallowed him. Smaller. A wound in reality being torn open by forces he could not comprehend. The warp resisted. It always resisted. But the Imperium was calling. Gravity. Order. The things chaos hated most. He moved toward it. Not by choice. By instinct. The same instinct that had driven him through Rapture's ruins. The same instinct that had kept him standing when splicers swarmed. The same instinct that had made him more than a machine and less than a man. The rift expanded. Light bled through. Not the light of the ocean. Not the bioluminescence of Rapture's grotesque beauty. This was harsher. Colder. The light of a galaxy at war. He stepped through. The warp screamed behind him, a soundless wail of frustration and hunger. And then it was gone. Replaced by gravity. By air. By the familiar weight of existence pressing down on him once more. He crashed into reality with the force of a meteor. Metal shrieked, stone shattered. Alarms blared in a language he did not understand. He stood slowly, drill spinning to life, armor dented but intact. Around him, darkness. The smell of burning promethium and human fear. And somewhere distant but unmistakable, the sound of a child crying. He began to walk. The underhive of tertium was a place the Emperor's light did not reach. 30 levels below the surface, beneath the manufactorums and hab blocks. Beneath even the Resic plants and the corpse starch facilities, there existed a layer of humanity the Imperium preferred to forget. The forgotten, the unwanted, the expendable. It was here that the cults thrive. Chaos whispered loudest to those who had nothing left to lose. Heresy spread like infection through the desperate and the damned. And when the cults needed sacrifices, they came to the underhive. They came for the children. The raid had been efficient. Cultists wearing flayed skin and rusted blades had swept through the refugee warrens, dragging screaming children from their parents' arms. 18 in total, ages 4 to 12. They were bound and gagged, thrown into cages fashioned from scrap metal and barbed wire. The ritual would begin at midnight. The dark gods were hungry. Blood would be spilled, souls would be offered. But the cultists had not accounted for the crash. The Big Daddy had torn through 3 levels of infrastructure on his way down. Metal, stone, and plastiel had given way beneath his weight. He had landed in a storage vault filled with rotting grain and fungal growths. The impact had shattered his porthole visor. Seawater no longer filled his helmet. He did not need it. The suit had adapted. Recycled air. Regulated pressure. He was designed to survive. That was all that mattered. He heard them before he saw them. The children, crying, whimpering. The sound cut through the layers of conditioning and programming like a drill through flesh. Instinct flared, purpose ignited. He moved. The cultists saw him first. A massive silhouette emerging from the darkness, over 7 feet of corroded armor and industrial brutality. They raised their weapons. Autogun, a stolen las rifle. They opened fire. The round sparked off his armor. Dented, scratched, but did not penetrate. The Big Daddy had been designed to withstand bullets from Rapture's most desperate splicers. These primitive weapons were nothing. He did not slow. The first cultist died without understanding what had killed him. The drill caught him in the chest, spinning at full speed, and turned bone and organs into a red mist. The second tried to run. The Big Daddy's gauntlet closed around his skull and crushed it like an egg. The third began to pray to the dark gods for deliverance. No deliverance came. The slaughter was methodical. The Big Daddy did not roar. He did not rage. He simply eliminated threats. One by one, cultists fell. Blood pooled on the rusted floor. The children screamed, not understanding that the monster tearing through their captors was the only reason they would survive the night. When the last cultist fell, silence returned. The Big Daddy stood in the center of the carnage, drill still humming, armor painted red. He turned toward the cages. The children stared at him, wide-eyed and trembling. Some cried, others simply stared. All of them were too terrified to move. He approached slowly, knelt. His massive frame still towered over them, but the posture was deliberate, non-threatening. He reached for the nearest cage. The metal bars were locked with a rusted chain. He grasped it and pulled. The chain snapped. He tore the door open. The children did not move. He stepped back, waited. One of the older boys, perhaps 10 years old, his face bruised and streaked with tears, took a hesitant step forward. Then another. He reached the open door, looked up at the Big Daddy, and ran. The others followed. A flood of small bodies scrambling out of the cages, stumbling over each other, desperate to escape. They ran past him, around him, some brushing against his legs as they fled into the shadows. He did not move, did not follow. He simply watched them go. All except one. A girl, no older than 6. Her hair was matted with blood and filth. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, amber and wrong. She stared at him, did not run, did not cry. She tilted her head, studying him with an expression far too calm for a child who had just witnessed a massacre. She looked like a little sister. She was not. He knew that. But the instinct did not care about details. It cared about the shape, the size, the vulnerability. She was a child. She was alone. She needed protection. He knelt again, extended his hand, palm up, waiting. She took a step forward, then another. She reached out, her small hand resting on his gauntlet. Her fingers traced the lines of rust and blood. She did not flinch, did not recoil. She simply looked at him with those strange, glowing eyes and smiled. That was when the guardsmen arrived. Boots hammered against metal. Flashlights cut through the darkness. A squad of Imperial Guard, responding to reports of cultist activity, burst into the chamber with lasguns raised. They saw the bodies, the blood, the cages, and the massive armored figure kneeling beside a child. The sergeant shouted orders, weapons trained on the Big Daddy. Fingers tightened on triggers. One word from the sergeant, and the Big Daddy would be vaporized. But the girl did not move. She stood beside him, her hand still resting on his gauntlet, looking at the guardsmen with calm, unblinking eyes. The sergeant hesitated, looked at the dead cultists, looked at the open cages, looked at the girl who should have been terrified but was not. He lowered his lasgun. The Big Daddy stood slowly. The girl's hand slipped from his gauntlet. He turned and walked into the shadows, his drill's hum fading into the distance. The guardsmen did not follow. They did not understand what they had witnessed. But they knew one thing. The children were alive, and something had saved them. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not believe in mercy. It believes in function, in efficiency, in the purity of the machine and the weakness of flesh. When the reports reached Mars, the tech priests saw not a guardian but a specimen, not a protector but a resource. An ancient fusion of organic and synthetic systems operating on principles that predated the Imperium itself. A relic from a forgotten age, or perhaps another reality entirely. They had to have it. The capture was not difficult. The Big Daddy did not resist when they surrounded him in the ruins of a hab block on Vorlon IV. He had been standing watch over a group of orphaned children, survivors of an orc raid. The tech priests approached with Skitarii escorts, weapons primed. They did not attack. They simply waited. And when the children were safely evacuated by local Arbites, the Big Daddy had no reason to fight. His purpose was fulfilled. He stood motionless as the Mechanicus bound him in magnetically sealed restraints and transported him to their forge ship. They brought him to Mars, to the Red Planet itself, to the vast labyrinthine workshops where the Omnissiah's mysteries were studied and steel was worshipped as sacred. They placed him in a containment cradle, suspending his massive frame in a web of neural interfaces and diagnostic probes. And then they began the dissection, not of his body, of his mind. Tech priest Dominus Arrakis led the research team. A hunched figure draped in crimson robes, his organic components reduced to a brainstem and a few strands of spinal tissue. The rest was steel and circuitry and faith. He circled the Big Daddy's suspended form, mechadendrites whirring, analyzing every inch of armor and flesh. The fusion was remarkable, pre-imperial, crude by Mechanicus standards yet undeniably functional. The armor was grafted directly to bone, the respiratory system modified to filter toxins and recycle oxygen, the muscular structure enhanced with synthetic fibers, the neural pathways rewired to eliminate pain response and enhance threat perception. And beneath it all, buried so deeply it barely registered on their instruments, a human soul. Arrakis wanted to extract it, replace it. The Mechanicus had perfected servitor conversion. They knew how to strip away consciousness and replace it with pure programming. The Big Daddy would make an excellent template for a new class of protector servitors. Obedient, free from the unpredictability of organic thought. They began the process. Neural inhibitors were implanted. Synaptic pathways flooded with sedative compounds. Memory engrams targeted for erasure. Arrakis himself oversaw the ritual, chanting the hymn of reforging as his subordinates worked. The Big Daddy's vitals fluctuated. His body resisted. But slowly, incrementally, they were winning. Until the girl screamed. Somewhere in the facility, 5 levels down, a child had been injured. A minor accident. A servitor malfunction had caused a support beam to collapse, pinning a Techacocolite's daughter beneath debris. She was 8 years old. She screamed for help, screamed for her father. The Big Daddy heard her. Every restraint in the containment cradle shattered simultaneously. Magnetic locks exploded. Neural inhibitors overloaded. The Big Daddy tore free from the diagnostic web with a roar of grinding metal and broke through 3 reinforced bulkheads before the Mechanicus even understood what had happened. He followed the sound, through corridors lined with servitors and half-built machines, through workshops where tech priests labored over sacred schematics, through chambers filled with the screaming static of corrupted data. He moved with singular focus. The girl was in danger. Nothing else mattered. He found her pinned beneath a steel beam that would have required a lifter servitor to move. He grasped it with both hands and lifted. The beam groaned. His armor groaned. Hydraulics shrieked. But he lifted. The girl scrambled free, sobbing, and ran to her father, who had just arrived. The Big Daddy released the beam. He'd crashed to the floor. He turned to leave. 50 Skitarii blocked his path. Weapons raised. Arc rifles charged. Zaraki stood behind them, his mechanical voice crackling with fury and fascination. "The child is safe," Zaraki said. "You will return to the containment cradle." The Big Daddy did not move. "You are not human," Zaraki continued. "You are a machine. You will obey the Omnissiah's will." The Big Daddy's drill began to spin. A warning. For 3 weeks they tried. Neuroconditioning, psychological reconditioning, sensory deprivation, chemical suppression. Every method the mechanicus had perfected over 10 millennia was employed. And every time a child cried anywhere in the facility, the Big Daddy broke free. He did not harm the tech priests. He did not destroy their research. He simply went to the child, made sure they were safe, and then returned to containment without resistance. It became routine, predictable. The mechanicus began testing it deliberately, placing children in simulated danger, triggering distress signals. Every time the same result. Zaraki realized the truth. The Big Daddy could not be reprogrammed because there was no program to overwrite. The bond to the children was not software. It was not even instinct. It was identity. Remove it and there would be nothing left. Just meat and metal. No function. No purpose. No value. The mechanicus cult debated for months. Some argued for termination. Others for containment. A few, the most radical, suggested veneration. A being that could not be corrupted from its purpose. A machine that served without ego or ambition. Was that not the purest expression of the Omnissiah's will? The decision was made by Fabricator General Call himself, who reviewed the data from his fortress laboratories on distant worlds. His response was simple: release the specimen. It is not a machine to be controlled. It is a machine that has already chosen its function. They released him on the agri-world of Quellin's Reach, a planet recently ravaged by Dark Eldar raids. Thousands of orphan children filled the refugee camps. The mechanicus withdrew and watched from orbit. The Big Daddy walked into the camps. The children fled at first, terrified of the armored giant. But when the Dark Eldar returned for a second raid, drawn by the psychic resonance of so much fear and suffering, the Big Daddy stood between them and the children. He did not move, did not retreat, did not fall. When the Eldar finally withdrew, frustrated by a prey that refused to break, the Big Daddy remained, standing watch, a silent sentinel in a galaxy that had forgotten what protection without purpose looked like. The mechanicus recorded everything. They did not understand him, but they no longer tried to own him. Chaos does not forgive anomalies. The ruinous powers exist to corrupt, to consume, to twist every soul in the galaxy into a reflection of their endless hunger. That is their nature. That is their purpose. And for 10,000 years they have succeeded. Space Marines fall. Saints succumb. Entire worlds kneel before the dark gods, their populations transformed into screaming monuments to madness. But the Big Daddy did not kneel. The cults noticed him first. Chaos worshippers operating in the shadows of the Imperium, spreading heresy through promises of power and freedom. They saw the report, the legend growing among the refugees. A silent guardian, a protector that could not be killed. They believed it was a weapon that could be claimed, turned. They were wrong. The first attempt came from a Sloneshi cult on Viridium Hive. They were artists of seduction, masters of manipulation. They offered him pleasure, freedom from duty, release from the chains of purpose that bound him. They showed him visions of rapture before the fall, of the man he used to be, of a life where he was not a slave to instinct. He walked past them, toward a child hiding in the ruins behind their ritual circle, a boy no older than 7 kidnapped for sacrifice. The cultists tried to stop him. He killed them without hesitation, without rage, just function. The boy lived. The cultists did not. The second attempt came from a Khornate warband raiding the agri-settlements of Stronvolv CI. Berserkers clad in crimson armor, driven by the blood god's endless thirst for skulls. They saw the Big Daddy defending a village and assumed he was a warrior. They challenged him to honorable combat, offered him a place in Khorne's legions, promised him eternal battle and glory. He did not respond, did not engage. He simply stood between them and the civilians. When they attacked, he defended, did not pursue, did not rave, did not revel in the killing. He was not a warrior. He was a wall, and walls do not thirst for blood. The Khornate forces withdrew, confused and frustrated. There was no honor in fighting something that did not fight back with fury. The third attempt came from a Nurglide plague cult festering in the void stations of the Gorlast sector. They believed all things must decay. That entropy was the only truth. They unleashed bioplagues designed to rot armor and flesh alike. Viruses that could corrode ceramite, spores that burrowed through even Terminator plate. But the Big Daddy's armor was not ceramite. It was an older technology, pre-Imperial, designed to withstand the pressures of the deep ocean and the corrosive horrors of Rapture's failed experiments. Nurgle's rot found no purchase. The seals hailed. The recycling systems purged the toxins. He walked through plague fog without slowing. The cultists died from their own diseases before they could touch him. The fourth attempt was the most dangerous. Tinge, the architect of fate, the changer of ways, sent his sorcerers to unravel the Big Daddy's mind. They were weavers of destiny, masters of manipulation and prophecy. They peered into his past, his future, the tangled threads of causality that bound him to this reality. And they found nothing, not emptiness, not absence, but a closed loop. A mind so singular, so utterly devoted to one purpose that there was no room for change, no ambition to exploit, no desire to twist, no fear to magnify. The Big Daddy existed in a state of absolute certainty. Protect the child. Everything else was irrelevant. Tanche's sorcerers attempted to rewrite his destiny, to insert new desires, new fears, new purposes. But every thread they touched snapped back into place. The Big Daddy's future was not written by fate. It was written by function, and function could not be changed without destroying the machine entirely. The sorcerers withdrew, baffled and unnerved. Singe himself, from his crystal labyrinth in the warp, observed the anomaly with something approaching curiosity. A being immune to change. In a universe where change was inevitable, where even the chaos gods themselves were constantly shifting and evolving, here was something that refused to be anything other than what it was. It should not exist, but it did. The Big Daddy became a problem chaos could not solve, not through seduction, not through rage, not through decay, not through manipulation. He was not a threat. He did not wage war against the dark gods. He did not preach faith in the Emperor. He simply existed, and wherever he went, chaos found its plans disrupted. Demonic incursions failed when he appeared, not because he banished demons with holy fire, but because he stood between them and their mortal prey with unbreakable resolve. Cultist uprisings collapsed when he rescued their sacrifices. Warp rifts destabilized when he walked through them, his singular purpose creating a psychic dead zone that even the Imperium could not penetrate. The Chaos Gods began to avoid him, not out of fear, out of disinterest. He was not a player in the great game. He was a piece that refused to move, and pieces that do not move are not worth the effort. But the mortals of the galaxy noticed. Survivors whispered his legend, a guardian who could not be corrupted, a protector immune to the warp's touch. In a universe where chaos claimed every soul eventually, here was proof that devotion to something pure could survive. They did not call him a saint. Saints served the Emperor. They did not call him a hero. Heroes sought glory. They called him the silent warden, the deep guardian, the protector who does not fall. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where hope had been extinguished long ago, that legend was enough to keep people alive for one more day. The Inquisition does not tolerate mysteries. In a galaxy where knowledge is heresy and ignorance is salvation, the Inquisitors are the ones who decide which truths are too dangerous to survive. They are judge, jury, and executioner. They wield authority that supersedes planetary governors, Astartes chapter masters, even cardinals of the ecclesiarchy. When the Inquisition declares something a threat, it ceases to exist. But the Big Daddy would not cease to exist. The reports reached Inquisitor Vascarian on the fortress world of Krethos IX. A veteran of the Ordo Xenos, Vascarian had spent 3 decades hunting alien infiltrators and rogue psychers. He was methodical, patient, and when the accounts of an armored giant protecting refugee convoys began to accumulate on his desk, he did what he always did. He investigated. The pattern was undeniable. Across 17 systems, the same story repeated. A massive figure in corroded armor, a spinning drill, unresponsive to orders. It appeared during attacks, evacuations, chaos raids, orc incursions, dark Eldar slave hunts. It did not fight for the Imperium. It fought for the children. That alone was heretical. The Imperium did not tolerate unsanctioned protectors. If it was not a space marine, not an Imperial Guard regiment, not a sanctioned militarum unit, then it was a threat. Simple as that. Vascarian assembled a kill team. Inquisitorial stormtroopers, a sanctioned psyker, a tech priest specializing in xenotech identification. They tracked the Big Daddy to a mining colony on Hadron's Gate, recently hid by a Genestealer cult uprising. The colony was in ruins. The Arbites had been slaughtered. The PDF had fled. The civilians were trapped in the central hab complex, surrounded by hybrid horrors. The Big Daddy was standing at the entrance. The Genestealers circled but did not attack. They were cautious, predatory, waiting for an opening. Vascarian's team arrived in a Valkyrie, descending through smoke and ash. They expected to find a Xenos construct, the Tau battlesuit perhaps, or some here-tech abomination from the dark age of technology. What they found was something far stranger. The Big Daddy did not acknowledge their arrival, did not turn, did not speak. He simply stood. The Genestealers, sensing weakness, surged forward. The Big Daddy moved. Vascarian watched through magnoculars as the slaughter unfolded. No finesse, no tactic, just overwhelming force and unbreakable resolve. The drill tore through chitin and flesh. The gauntlet crushed skulls. When a hybrid tried to flank him, he caught it mid-leap and drove it into the ground with enough force to shatter stone. But what disturbed Vascarian most was the restraint. The Big Daddy did not pursue, did not hunt. When the Genestealers retreated, he returned to his post, stood watch, waited. Vascarian ordered the psyker to scan him. The psyker, a woman named Ilara, who had served the Inquisition for 12 years, extended her senses, reached into the warp, touched the edges of the Big Daddy's mind. She gasped, stumbled backward. Blood dripped from her nose. "What did you see?" Vascarian demanded. "Nothing," she whispered. "I saw nothing. Not emptiness, not corruption. Just purpose, like staring into a sealed vault. There is no chaos in him, Inquisitor. There is no ambition, no hate, no fear, just duty." Vascarian frowned. "Everything has cracks. Everything can be corrupted." "Not him," Ilara said quietly. "He is not human anymore. But he is not a machine either. He is something in between. And whatever he is, the warp cannot touch it." Vascarian did not believe her. He summoned the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are the Imperium's ultimate weapon against chaos. Incorruptible space marines, psychically attuned, armed with weapons blessed by the Emperor himself. If the Big Daddy was tainted, the Grey Knights would purge him. If he was innocent, they would know. Castellan Drigos arrived with a squad of paladins. They confronted the Big Daddy on the frozen plains of Vorsek III, where he had been guarding a convoy of refugees fleeing from a word-bearer's assault. Dragos approached cautiously, his nemesis Force sword crackling with psychic energy. He spoke the litany of purity, invoked the Emperor's name, demanded the Big Daddy identify himself. The Big Daddy did not respond. Dragos attempted a psychic probe, gentle at first, then forceful. The result was the same as Ilara's, a closed door, a mind locked around a singular truth. No corruption, no taint, no weakness. Dragos lowered his sword. "This is not our enemy," he said quietly. The Grey Knights withdrew. They filed their report with the Inquisition. The Big Daddy was not a threat to the Imperium. He was not a servant of chaos. He was not a Xenos infiltrator. He was something the Imperium did not have words for. A guardian without allegiance. A protector without faith. The Inquisition debated for months. Some argued for extermination on principle, others for observation. A few, the most radical, argued for recruitment. Imagine an army of such guardians, they said, immune to corruption, utterly devoted to protecting the innocent. But the Big Daddy could not be recruited, could not be controlled, could not be understood. In the end, the Inquisition made a choice that went against every instinct they had. They did nothing. They classified the Big Daddy as a non-hostile anomaly, marked his movements, warned Imperial forces not to engage unless absolutely necessary. And quietly, without official sanction, some Inquisitors began redirecting refugee convoys toward his known patrol routes. And the refugees noticed. They began painting crude symbols on their ships, diving helmets, circles with portholes, the mark of the silent guardian. It was not worship. It was not faith. It was hope. The simple, desperate hope that somewhere in the darkness, something still cared whether they lived or died. The Inquisition allowed it, because even they understood that in a galaxy drowning in despair, hope was sometimes the only weapon left. The Golden Throne is not a throne. It is a prison, a life support system, a psychic lighthouse burning with the soul of a god who can never die and never rest. The Emperor of mankind sits within it, his body a withered husk kept alive by machinery older than the Imperium itself. 10,000 years he has sat there. 10,000 years he has held the gateway to the webway closed. 10,000 years he has guided the astronomicon, the psychic beacon that allows humanity to navigate the warp. And for 10,000 years he has felt every scream in the galaxy. The Emperor is not omniscient. He cannot see all, cannot know all. The galaxy is too vast, the warp too chaotic, but he feels the echoes, the prayers of trillions, the terror of worlds burning, the desperate hope of those who call his name in the darkness. It is a cacophony, a tidal wave of psychic energy that would shatter any lesser mind. But even within that endless storm, something caught his attention. It was not a prayer, not in the way the Imperium prayed, not word, not devotion, not faith in his divinity. It was something quieter. A single note within the symphony of suffering, a presence that radiated not ambition or fear or rage, but protection. The Emperor turned his vast awareness toward it, reached through the warp with a fragment of his infinite consciousness, and he saw the Big Daddy. He saw Rapture, the underwater city built on ambition and drowned in hubris. He saw the genetic horrors, the little sisters. He saw a man broken and rebuilt into a monster for the sole purpose of protection. He saw the bond, the instinct, the unbreakable core of purpose that had survived reconditioning, corruption, and even the warp itself. The Emperor understood. He had created such bonds before. His sons, each crafted with purpose, each bound to him through genetic and psychic ties. But those bonds had been corrupted, twisted by chaos. Half his sons had turned against him. The Great Crusade had collapsed into the Horus Heresy. Bloodshed, the dream of a united humanity, shattered. But this being, this protector from another reality, he had not broken. His bond had not corrupted. He had endured the warp, resisted chaos, not through faith in the Emperor, not through worship of the Omnissiah, but through something far more fundamental: duty, the simple, unshakable need to protect those weaker than himself. The Emperor reached deeper, touched the buried remnants of the man within the armor, the memories suppressed by surgery and chemicals, the guilt, the choices that had led him to Rapture, the desperation that had driven him into the Protector program. And beneath it all, a name: James Calloway. The man had been a father once, before Rapture, before the debt and the addiction and the choices that destroyed everything he had. His daughter had died because of him. An accident, his fault. And when Rapture offered him a chance to protect other children, to atone through service, he had taken it, not for redemption. He knew there was no redemption, but because someone had to. The Emperor felt something he had not felt in millennia: recognition, kinship. He too was a protector bound by duty, a guardian imprisoned by purpose. His body was failing, his mind fracturing under the weight of holding the Imperium together. But he could not stop, could not rest, could not abandon humanity, no matter how much they failed him. James Calloway, the Big Daddy. He understood. The Emperor sent a response, not word, not visions, just a pulse of psychic warmth, acknowledgement, the sensation of standing in sunlight after years in darkness. For the Big Daddy, walking through the ruins of a shattered hive city, it was overwhelming. He stopped. His drill ceased spinning. His armor groaned as he stood motionless, processing something his mind could not comprehend. For the first time since Rapture, he felt seen, not as a weapon, not as a monster, not as a tool, but as what he had always been, a guardian. And in that moment, something shifted within him. The layers of conditioning did not fade. The programming did not break. But beneath it all, the man named James Calloway stirred. Not fully, not enough to reclaim control, but enough to remember, to know that he was not alone. That somewhere, in the vast machinery of the Imperium, something greater understood his purpose. The moment passed. The warmth faded. The Emperor's attention turned back to the endless war. The war pressed in. The throne demanded his focus. But the connection had been made. A thread so thin it could barely be felt, but unbreakable. From that day forward, the Big Daddy walked differently. Not slower, not hesitant, but with something that might have been peace. He did not pray, did not speak the Emperor's name, did not swear oaths of loyalty, but he continued his work, protecting the forgotten, guarding the helpless, standing between the innocent and annihilation. And the Emperor from his throne of gold and suffering watched, not as a god observing a mortal, but as one guardian acknowledging another. The Imperium did not notice. The priests and commanders and inquisitors saw only what they had always seen, a rogue protector, an anomaly, a mystery to be catalogued and ignored. But the refugees knew. The children knew. They felt the change. The diving helmet symbols painted on walls began to appear beside the Aquila, not replacing it, not challenging it, just existing beside it. Two symbols of protection in a galaxy that had forgotten what protection meant. Theologians debated whether it was heresy. Some said yes. Others argued that any protector of humanity, regardless of origin, served the Emperor's will. The arguments raged in cathedral halls and inquisitorial chambers. But in the underhives and refugee camps in forgotten corners of the galaxy, no one cared about theology. They only cared that when the darkness came, when the monsters emerged from the shadows, there was something that stood between them and death. Something that did not ask for worship, did not demand loyalty, did not judge or condemn. It simply protected, and that in the end was enough. Legends do not begin with decrees. They begin with whispers, with survivors telling stories, with hope passed from one desperate soul to another. The Imperium has saints, heroes blessed by the Emperor, martyrs enshrined in cathedrals, warriors whose deeds are recorded in great tomes and recited by preachers. But the Big Daddy was not a saint. He was something else, something smaller, something more human. He was a folktale. The first story spread through the refugee fleets. Ships crowded with the displaced, the broken, those fleeing wars they did not understand. They carried nothing but the clothes on their backs and the hope that somewhere, somehow, they would survive. And they told stories of a guardian in the darkness, a figure in corroded armor who appeared when all hope was gone. A convoy fleeing the tyrannid invasion of the Goran sector reported that when their engines failed and genostealers boarded, a massive figure tore through the hull and fought until every Xenos was dead. He did not speak, did not ask for thanks. He simply left. A group of miners trapped in a collapsed shaft on Viridian the Third swore that when the air ran out and darkness closed in, they heard the hum of a drill. The wall exploded inward. A giant in a diving suit pulled them free and vanished into the depths before they could see his face. Orphans in the underhives of Krondus Prime painted murals of a protector with glowing eyes and a spinning drill. They said he walked the deepest tunnels where even the gangs feared to go and kept the monsters away. The stories were impossible. The Administratum dismissed them as hysteria. The Ecclesiarchy condemned them as superstition. But the stories did not stop. They spread. World to world, system to system. The refugees painted his symbol on their ships. The diving helmet, cruel but unmistakable. And then the commanders began to notice. General Krast of the Vorland 14th Infantry Regiment was the first to test it. His regiment had been tasked with evacuating civilians from a world under orc assault. The greenskins were closing in. Time was running out. Krast ordered his forces to redirect the evacuation route through the underhive, toward the last reported sighting of the Big Daddy. His officers protested. It was madness. relying on a myth to save lives. But Krast was desperate, and desperate men make gambles. The civilians reached the underhive. The orcs followed, and the Big Daddy was there. He held the choke point for 6 hours. The orcs threw themselves at him in waves. A war boss riding a war trike. None of them passed. By the time Krast's forces arrived to relieve him, the corridor was piled with green corpses. The Big Daddy stood motionless, his armor cracked and smoking, his drills shattered. But the civilians were safe. Krast filed his report. The administratum buried it. But the soldiers talked, and the refugees remembered. More commanders began using him. Not officially. Never officially. But evacuation routes began to align with his movements. Refugee ships were directed towards systems where he had been sighted. Distress beacons were sent on frequencies that, coincidentally, he seemed to respond to. No one understood how he knew. How he appeared exactly where he was needed. Some believed he could hear the fear of children across the void. Others thought he was guided by the Emperor himself. The truth was simpler. He walked. He listened. And when he heard suffering, he moved toward it. The Imperium did not sanction him, did not honor him, did not even acknowledge his existence. But the people did. And in a galaxy where the Imperium's protection was rationed by bureaucracy and politics, the people took what protection they could find. The diving helmet became a symbol, not of the Emperor, not of the Imperium, but of survival. Refugees carved it into the walls of evacuation shelters. Soldiers etched it into their armor for luck. Parents told their children stories of the deep-sea knight who walked the darkness and never let the monsters win. The ecclesiarchy tried to suppress it. Preachers declared it heresy. Inquisitors burned the symbols where they found them. But the symbols kept appearing, because the people needed them. Because in a universe of gods and demons and endless war, they needed to believe that something still cared. And the Big Daddy kept walking, through war zones, through plague worlds, through systems burning under the fires of chaos and xenos and insurrection. He did not seek glory, did not build monuments, did not demand worship. He simply found the places where children were in danger and stood between them and death. On the frozen wastes of Naxxor IV, he stood watch over a refugee camp for 3 months, enduring blizzards and orc raids until Imperial reinforcements finally arrived. In the asteroid mining colonies of the Telvar Belt, he walked the vacuum tunnels, rescuing workers trapped by pirate attacks, never stopping until every soul was accounted for. On the hive world of Khalistan, he descended into the lowest levels, where the light of the Emperor had not reached in centuries, and cleared out the mutant hordes that preyed on the desperate. He did not choose these places. They chose him. Or perhaps he simply went where he was needed most. Either way, the result was the same. Wherever the Big Daddy walked, hope followed. And hope in the grim darkness of the far future was the rarest treasure of all. The Imperium would never officially recognize him, would never grant him honors or titles, would never admit that a being from beyond the Imperium could serve humanity better than many of its own soldiers. But that did not matter, because the people recognized him. The refugees, the forgotten, they knew, and they remembered. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the approval of the Imperium, not the blessings of the ecclesiarchy, just the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness a guardian walked, unyielding, eternal. The deep-sea knight of the Imperium, protector of the forgotten, hope given form, and he would never stop walking. The galaxy burns. It has always burned. It will always burn. That is the nature of the 41st millennium. War without end, suffering without purpose, darkness without light. The Imperium crumbles, chaos devours, the xenos close in from every side, and humanity, fragile and doomed, clings to survival one day at a time. But in the forgotten places where the Imperium's gaze does not reach, where hope should have died long ago, something still stands watch. The Big Daddy does not age, or if he does, it is too slow to measure. His armor corrodes, his systems degrade, but he endures. Repairs made in scavenged workshops, replacement parts salvaged from wrecks. The people he protects keep him functional, not out of worship, out of gratitude, out of need. He walks the same route, the underhives, the refugee stations, the colony worlds on the edge of the void, anywhere the forgotten gather, anywhere children cry in the darkness. That is where he goes. He does not speak, has never spoken. Perhaps he cannot. Perhaps he chooses not to. It does not matter. His presence is enough. The hum of his drill, the heavy footsteps echoing through empty corridors, the silhouette standing at the entrance, unyielding, waiting for the monsters to come. And they always come. Cultists seeking sacrifices, pirates hunting slaves, Tyranid scouts probing for weakness, orc raiders looking for a fight, dark Eldar savoring fear. It does not matter what they are. The result is always the same. They meet the Big Daddy, and they do not pass. He has died 100 times, torn apart by gunfire, crushed by debris, burned by plasma, frozen in the void, but he always returns. Rebuilt by the survivors, patched together by grateful hands, because as long as he stands, they have a chance. The Imperium does not remember him. Records are lost, reports are buried, bureaucracy swallows everything. 100 years pass. The officials who once debated his existence are long dead. The inquisitors who investigated him are dust. The galaxy moves on, but the people do not forget. The diving helmet is still painted on walls, still carved into doors, still whispered about in the dark. Parents still tell their children the story of the guardian who came from the deep, who could not be broken, who would never abandon his post. And somewhere, in a flooded void station on the edge of known space, the Big Daddy stands. Water drips from broken pipes. Emergency lights flicker. Somewhere in the darkness, a child is hiding. Terrified, certain that death is coming, the child hears footsteps echoing through the corridors. The child presses against the wall, too afraid to move. The footsteps stop. A shadow falls across the doorway. Inhuman. The child begins to cry. The Big Daddy kneels, slowly, carefully. His porthole eyes glow faintly in the darkness. He extends his hand, palm up, waiting. The child stares, trembling, and then slowly reaches out. Small fingers touch cold metal. The Big Daddy's hand closes gently around the child's, not restraining, just holding, just saying without words what he has always said. You are safe now. The monsters are coming. They are always coming. But they will not reach this child, because the Big Daddy stands between them. And he will not move, will not break, will not fall. Not while a child needs protection. That is his purpose. It has always been his purpose. It will always be his purpose. He is not a hero. Heroes win. Heroes triumph. Heroes are celebrated. He is not a saint. Saints inspire faith. Saints perform miracles. Saints ascend to legend. He is just a guardian, doing what guardians do. Standing watch, enduring, never leaving his post. The galaxy will burn. The Imperium will fall. The stars themselves will die. But until that final moment, until the last child draws their last breath, the Big Daddy will walk through the darkness, through the ruins, through the endless, hopeless war. Because someone asked. Because that is what he was made for. Because deep within the corroded armor and the shattered memories and the buried guilt, a man named James Calloway made a promise. To protect, to atone, to never let another child suffer alone. And even if the man is gone, even if only instinct remains, the promise endures. So we walk, one step at a time, through the flooded corridors, through the collapsing hive cities, through the burning worlds and dying stars. The drill hum, constant, a lullaby in the darkness, and somewhere a child sleeps, unaware of the silent sentinel standing guard outside their door, the guardian who will never leave his post, the protector who cannot be broken, the hope that refuses to die, not a savior, not a saint, just a Big Daddy, doing what Big Daddies do.